through this, this Red Eye series. But again, people need to pick up this and go and do their own homework. One of the most important questions is, was the Bavarian Illuminati really anti-royalist, as 99.9 of the books mention?
Yeah.
Then we have a question of, were the historical conflicts between lodges and orders, were they really legit? This whole concept of the church versus the Knights Templars, this whole question of York Rite Freemasonry of England being opposed to the Scottish Rite Freemasons of Scotland. Like I said, other lodges, say in Italy or Germany, their little conflicts. I've always spoken in my work about the difference between the esoteric versions of Christianity and the esoteric, right? There's the exoteric and the esoteric, and they appear to have conflicts. These conflicts are on paper, and they even have casualties physically. But if you start studying a little bit deeper, you find that a lot of these conflicts are organized by the same hand. Most people are familiar now with the role of the Rothschild banking dynasty and how they were absolutely in the middle of so many internecine conflicts, and they were funding it, different brothers from the same house. So it's acceptable there that a dynasty can do this. Well, we have to understand that from almost 2,000 years since the advent of Christianity, there have been these other faux conflicts that are absolutely there in order to distract the human race, thinking that there are these legitimate conflicts over here. But one strange thing happens is when we start looking into it, we find that's the same controlling hand manipulating both sides of those conflicts.
Yes.
Then we have the question of who came first. There's an important question about who actually is the antecedent group here. Was it the Knights Templars, or the Masons? And if we move on, we find out that an important question is, are Masons really corrupt? Is Masonry, to be feared? Because I believe, there's legitimacy to that question, because you see, let's imagine for a moment, we're not talking about Masonic lodges. Say we're talking about a business, a corporation like Enron, right? Or any corporation, or even for that matter, certain governments. We know that, just like Joel Bakan said in his fine book on the corporation, a corporation can be psychopathic.
Absolutely.
What he really meant there, of course, is that not the corporation is psychopathic, but the men who run or fund or build a corporation can be completely insane. They can be people who are just despots. It can happen. Governments are filled with these people. So say we look at Masonry as a corporation, and we have to look at Masonry as a corporation, because do you know how many corporations of the world have Masons sitting on the boards?
There you go, yeah.
So I believe that the analogy is perfectly legitimate. And say we believe this, then we must ask whether or not, by the same definitions that Joel Bakan has used to diagnose a corporation, that's what we are doing in this presentation, and that's what I do in my work. I'm not against individual Masons. I know they do a great deal of good work. I've no peeve with individuals. I treat all individuals as I see them. But there are these certain tendencies, and there is this danger that a corporate body, which is what Masonry really is, and just like any corporate body, it has divisions, everything from the janitor at the bottom to the executives in the penthouse, and everybody else in between, you see. So we're not implicating everybody wholesale here. We're trying to identify where the evil really is coming from. As I said, Masons should be doing this themselves. They haven't done a very good job. And so, they can step back and let other people who are objective, try to answer those questions.
Yes.
Then we have a very important question, which a lot of skeptics bring up, but I also believe it's pretty legit, and is, can we believe the information that we read in these books if those books are written by Masons? I mean, there's nothing to say that you couldn't believe it. I mean, there's no reason why a Mason couldn't tell the truth. And remember, we have a lot of whistleblowers. I've already said that a lot of my work is based on the whistleblowers from behind the clergy or behind, these orders. But then again, the question always arises, and in an objective investigator, it's always on his mind. Every page you turn, every line you read, you must always be thinking, can I believe what is being said here?
Yes.
And of course, let's not forget that they may have non-Masons commissioned to write books, so you don't even know that they are Freemasons.
Always a possibility, very difficult. So everything has to be, everyone who's looking into this have to use their discernment at all levels, even those who criticize, Masonry also. So, on all fronts here, that's where we need to
And that's
look.
That's what this third question is all about, because the skeptic is not on very solid ground either. You can easily kick the stool from out under their smiling, grinning faces, because how can we believe information on Masonry written by you guys, the so-called anti-Masons?
Yeah.
And believe me, I've plowed through enough garbage that these people have written to know that it isn't worth too much salt. It's either coming from extreme right-wing Christians who've got some sort of peeve, and they haven't even the faintest idea that half the people that are their own chiefs chiefs of religion, chiefs of foundations, chiefs of evangelistic organizations, chief politicians like Billy Graham are Freemasons. So yeah, well, I mean, great. That's a great source of information right there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've often been asked by people, who've accused me, or they want to know why is it that I'm not a Christian and I come from an occult world, and aren't you part of the occult agenda? How can you be speaking up against occultists?
Mm-hmm.
And I have always to remind them and remind the people who are listening to this that, listen, long before Christianity even appeared on this planet, evil was on this planet.
Yeah.
And also the enemies of evil was on this planet, fighting, like Billy O's, and giving their lives and sacrificing their people and going to war and bloody wars to fight the dark forces on this planet long before Christianity even got out of its diapers. So, they're racing to the fight, and it's important that they, know they join the fight, and we're all facing the same enemy here. But never think that evil just began when the Bible was written or Jesus came on the scene and it all started then, and that the Christians are the only ones to know how to fight evil. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And again, it's all those people who don't have any, allegiances or religious philosophy behind themselves. They are, equally right to fight what they consider to be morally wrong, and then it doesn't matter what kind of allegiance you have, really. And that's also where many people can, dovetail on, so to speak. This is where people can meet and have some common ground, even though if they're, someone is a Christian or not, whatever. It's also a question about morality. If we can stand together, as it were, and fight against what we consider to be immoral and what is degrading, society and the culture and the world we're living in.
Well, if you see some old granny burning in a house that's been set, a bunch of louts have broken into her house and set it on fire, you don't stand there watching her burn while you wait. Well, we're dialing 999 right now. The paramedics are on their way. The police will be here in a couple of hours,
Right.
You obviously dive in there and try to help as much as you can, throw some buckets of water or do whatever you can. And then the true authorities come. But in the meantime, I think the granny will be more than happy for you to, come in there and give her a hand out the window,
Yeah, absolutely.
But another important question is why the Masonic preoccupation with light. This is something that has preoccupied me a lot because it's in our faces and we don't think about it. A study of their symbolism shows that they're into light. And also, do Masons worship Lucifer, as their own writings and their own remarks imply? They're accused of this Luciferian worship. Their own documents bandy the term about. So we maybe have to look at the meaning of the word Lucifer. You and I have already done a show on Lucifer and the dark side of the sun.
Yes.
And that is very applicable to what we're talking about here. What is Lucifer? Is Lucifer the same thing as Satan, as a lot of Christians believe, or are they mistaken there? And so forth and so on. And just this whole preoccupation with light.
Very interesting, and absolutely. Let's keep that in the back of our heads, as it were, as we go through some of this as well. And we have another question, I guess, if we move on in the slides here.
Absolutely. There's this one is that.
If there's some esoteric...
Is there some...
Yes.
Yeah, I see it. Is there indeed some esoteric truth that can only be gained via Masonic membership, and after adhering to Masonic ritual?
Yes.
And remember, they got their degree ceremonies. Some Masons say they have to take a long time to get up the ladder. And the basic idea is, maybe we're wrong. Maybe these guys have some incredible secret up there, and there's no odds. Don't we have fraternities in school? You just don't go in and get a master's degree the moment you walk through the door. So the average Mason is going to say to you, "Listen, buddy, what's your problem? You have fraternities in your workplace, you have it in the police, you have it in schools and colleges and universities. And we got the same. We got some secret knowledge here. We're not just going to hand it out to any punk. So we have this hierarchy for a reason." And that's a very important question to look into. Hopefully, we can even get into this whole question of even what is hierarchy, and is hierarchy even needed at all in its own self?
Yeah.
But certainly in the context of Masonry, it's very important to start working out whether or not they do have some sort of arcane secret, and maybe we are the ones who are sort of not with the right gig,
To keep it short, do you believe that is the case?
No, I believe my Irish Origins book, Volume 1, has lengthy, examinations of the lie of that by way of the promise, men are enslaved, good men.
And the mystery that lies in of not knowing what is behind the next degree or up the next step of the ladder, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Because this is like a con game. This is like a manipulation of, in other words, there could be a secret knowledge there, but if there isn't, it's just as good as promising Christians some eternal paradise in the next world. And of course, the Eastern religions do the same thing. And then you live in misery in this world. And I have a personal belief that this particular carrot and a stick is utterly, reprehensible. That man is quite capable of using nature as a guide,
Yes.
or his own intelligence as a guide to learn all the various things. And you're not going to need anything as sort of structured as pernicious. And I'm worried. You see, personally, as a side note, I'm worried when I see hierarchy. We'll explain this later when we get to the subject of hierarchy. But the very fact that hierarchy exists to me is worrisome, because hierarchy is demonic. In my idea, the very idea of hierarchy is anti-natural and has nothing good about it. It may be a steadying action in the beginning of a particular course of study or whatever, but ultimately it's not required at all.
Okay, that's interesting. I definitely want to talk more about that later on. Let's move on here to the next slide, as it were, and talk about that.
Well, why do top Masons consistently and vehemently insist that Masonry is not a religious institution? After all, Masonry has innumerable Judaic elements, and the Jews, of course, are religious, aren't they? So, are there facts then that can explain this, inconsistency? Are they saying that? I believe they're saying that it isn't religious, because they'll do anything in order to stop you looking into the Judaic elements. If they claim that they were religious, it would be a much easier job than to track the reason why they have this sort of. You see, here's their problem. If they say that they are religious, then all peoples, all critics, and even people from religion are going to say, but you have too many pagan elements, so what's with that? If they don't say that they're religious, then they can have those pagan elements and sort of convince people that you see that they're not religious, meaning that, now that there's a reason why they can have these pagan elements, and it doesn't tarnish people's opinion about religion, and it doesn't send you off to look at the religious scriptures or the religious traditions and also see the pagan elements. You see what I'm saying? It's like a bit of a dodge that they're doing here. Because if they were to say that, yes, we are religious, we are Judaic, well, then people would just go, well, then Judaism is nothing more than paganism, so is Christianity, which of course it is.
Yeah, I think
So they would get into trouble, you see, if they openly admitted this. So that's just one of the reasons I think that they always try to tell you, oh, no, there's nothing, we're very egalitarian, we're very ecumenical. There's nothing, specifically Christian or Judaic about us.
I think Jordan Maxwell talked about the term henoistic or henotheology, where you accept a lot of different gods, but you've chosen one out of many in the pantheon, as it were, and have chosen that god as the primary one. Have you heard about that, Michael?
Yes, I absolutely believe in monotheism is basically a word that never should have been used, not even in Christianity or Judaism. It's another one of the complete lies. That's what Jordan was basically focusing in on and highlighting, is that the very term monotheism is utterly meaningless. It never should have been coined. It never should have been used. It's certainly misappropriated when you're talking about, in the book of Genesis, the God is talking about the us.
Yes.
The Elohim, by translation, is an us.
Yes.
Is a plurality, exactly. So, again, you go to the horse's mouth. We didn't say it. We didn't write it in there. In fact, one of the quotes from the Bible where the gods are saying, let us go and make man in our image, the true Hebrew translation is, let us go and remake man in our image.
Yes.
Like it's ours, first of all, and then they're even talking about that Adam wasn't the first creation of the gods. The unbelievable, sleight of hand that's been used in the translation of these texts is just unbelievable.
Let's look a little bit at the term Freemason then, and get up the next slide here.
Well, the real meaning of the word comes from the French Freemason, which means son of the sun. But just on a purely, mundane dictionary level, from a typical encyclopedia, it would basically tell you that the term free comes about from the fact that not the original Masons, but before the 1700s, you had the operative stonemasons. These were always Christians. These were always Catholics. Stonemasons, that most people believe are the origin of modern Freemasonry. They were called free because they were able to wander around, you see, when they worked on these building projects, when they built the great cathedrals. They weren't fixed to one place. And so being free to move around, people, they said that they came up with the word Freemason. But everything in Freemasonry is labyrinthine. Everything has a denotative and a connotative meaning. Everything has, multiple nuances and layers and hidden meanings. So, again, behind the term